UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Rodrigues. Best and worst case scenarios that could possibly happen on this UFC Fight Night. It's a great card. It is a really, really good card. So on that side of things, there's really no bad case scenario here. Of course, every fight goes to a decision. It's going to be a horrible case scenario. It's going to be a good card. I can almost guarantee you that. But we're going to look at every single fight and figure out what is going to be the best and worst case scenario. Walter Walker winning and being ranked in the heavyweight division is utterly horrible for the heavyweight division. So that's some of the stuff we're going to be talking about, as well as the main event, co-main event as well. Of course, if you do want to see all the bets I am making for this UFC Fight Night, check that top link down below in that pinned comment for the Burt MMA Gold membership. We got all my MMA bets, early fight news on fights that are not actually announced to the public. We got them inside scoops for UFC fight announcements right there. We got full UFC rankings for every fighter on the roster, the best prospects outside of the UFC, and a way for you to actually contact UFC fighters. You want to talk to Dricus du Plessis, we actually have a contact for him if you want to talk to him or ask him a question or things like that. So check out the Burt MMA Gold membership. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, what are the worst case scenarios for UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Rodrigues? And what are the best case scenarios? Best case scenario for the main event, Gregory Rodrigues and Jared Cannonier. Of course, the best case scenario is going to be new blood inside of that top 10. Gregory Rodrigues needs to go out there and win that fight. And that is an amazing, amazing thing for the middleweight division, because if we look at 185 pounds, Dricus du Plessis has beaten Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, and Robert Whittaker. It's likely that Hamza Chimaev is going to get the next shot. Imavov maybe is going to fight Caio Borralho. One of them could lose their next fight. And we really only have two guys, Imavov and Chimaev, that are going to be next for Dricus du Plessis, and then maybe Anthony Hernandez coming up. But we need new, fresh contenders to stifle in for Dricus du Plessis, so it's not going to become an Alexandre Pantoja where he's beaten everybody inside of that top 5. So the best thing for the UFC middleweight division is just fresh contenders for Dricus du Plessis. After Chimaev, he's going to do Imavov. After Imavov, he's going to go down and fight Anthony Hernandez. Then a Bo Nickel. But if we have a Gregory Rodrigues in there, a banger UFC middleweight matchup, it's another thing that could be very, very good for the UFC middleweight division. You can bring that fight anywhere on the globe. Gregory and Dricus have great personalities to make that a fun build-up as well. So best case scenario, Gregory goes out there and knocks out Jared, and we got yet another good induction of the top 10 of the middleweight division for Dricus du Plessis to potentially fight in the next year or two. Worst case scenario, of course, Jared Cannonier goes out there and beats Gregory Rodrigues in a split decision, barely wins, and kind of retains on to his gatekeeper status of the UFC middleweight division. Nobody really wants that. He's 40 years old. He's not going to fight for the belt ever again. He's just going to be a gatekeeper, and Jared Cannonier is very, very good. He's a very, very good gatekeeper. So we're not going to like that if he fights Anthony and he beats Anthony. If he beats Bo Nickel and really stifles some of the other guys that are trying to enter their way inside of the top 5. We're not going to like it if he's ruining some of the prospects of the middleweight division, including Gregory. It's just going to be one less and one less and one less guy that could be introduced to the top 5 and inflected in to fight Dricus du Plessis. So Jared Cannonier, we don't want him. We don't want him. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a fan of Jared Cannonier. His fights are fun. But the worst case scenario is him winning and just kind of retaining on to that gatekeeper status in the middleweight division. Calvin Kattar, Youssef Zalal. Best case scenario, Youssef Zalal submission over Calvin Kattar and a great post-fight interview. That's the best possible case scenario here, is that he really builds his name. Goes out there, does what Josh Emmett and Aljamain Sterling and really Arnold couldn't do, is actually finish him. That was an injury. And if you're able to finish Calvin Kattar, that's a big, big thing to do. Calvin's a hard guy to finish. And if he ends it off with a post-fight interview that he's really calling out Ilya, and that's a great thing for the featherweight division. So that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, Calvin wins. That's basically it. Calvin's fun, but he's old. He's 36, 37 years old. Best case scenario, Youssef goes out there and submits him and has a great post-fight interview. Best case scenario for the middleweight division, of course, is Edmen Shahbazyan by knockout. obviously. Dylan Butka winning is horrible for the UFC. He's 0-2. He's not very good. If he goes out there and wrestles and grapples and gets a boring decision, that's not going to be good. So that's a pretty obvious one for me. Nazim versus Ismail. Honestly, either way, this is good. Either way, this is good for the UFC. Nazim winning is good for Azerbaijan. Ismail Bonfim is good if he's able to go out there and win. He's a fun fighter. Knocked out Terrence McKinney. Lost to Benoit Saint-Denis. He's 2-1 in the UFC. Nazim is, 2 and a draw in the UFC. So either way, there is no bad case scenario here other than a boring fight, win or lose. Either way this fight goes, the UFC can build. But I would say the UFC probably would rather Nazim win because they already have a lot of Brazil representation, especially at lightweight. They're going to be needing some representation from Azerbaijan, so I would assume best case scenario, Nazim goes out there and wins and represents for Azerbaijan. Rodolfo Vieira, Andre Petroski. This is an interesting one. Again, there's not really a great case scenario because I don't think the UFC necessarily wants either guy to win and get inside of the top 15 because they're both older. They're both not the most exciting fighters ever. But I would say Rodolfo's probably the better case scenario to go out there and win. Because win or lose, he's putting on fun fights. Even his only decision he's had in the UFC was a fun fight with Chris Curtis. He's submitting guys and finishing guys. Andre's also got a lot of finishes, but Rodolfo has slightly funner and better fights. So I would say best case scenario, Rodolfo wins. Worst case scenario, a boring Andre Petroski decision. Jose Delgado, Conor Matthews. It's just an easy one. Conor Matthews is a guy, if he loses here, he's going to be cut. He's 0-1 in the UFC. Lost on Contender, won on Contender after that. Best case scenario, Jose, as a good, young, tall, lengthy prospect, goes out there and knocks out Conor Matthews. Worst case scenario, Conor goes out there and decisions Jose Delgado. So they're definitely wanting Jose Delgado to go out there and win. For women's strawweight, this is interesting because Ketlin's not a big name. Angela is the only real black representation on the women's MMA side of things. I could look at the UFC rankings for women's MMA. There's really not a lot of great, African-American black women fighters. Top 15 of flyweight has none. It's literally just her at strawweight, and I don't believe there's any in women's bantamweight. So just for the fact that Ketlin Souza really isn't a popular name, it's Brazil, so it's not like she needs to represent her country on her own. She's 40 years old, and I know she's not gonna be a champion anytime soon. She's representation at the bare minimum there in the women's strawweight division for female MMA, for black MMA as well. So that's about it. Angela Hill, probably best case scenario, she goes out there because they don't have a lot of upside with Ketlin Souza going out there and winning. Jared Gordon, Mashrabjan Ruziboy, very simple. Mashrabjan probably just signed a few fight deal for 12-12. They're rooting for Mashrabjan to win. He is from a country that goes freaking crazy for their fighters in Uzbekistan. He's 28 years old. They are for sure, best case scenario, Mashrabjan goes out there and knocks out Jared Gordon. It is as simple as that. Rafael Estevam, Jesus Aguilar, best case scenario, Jesus Aguilar goes out there and finishes Rafael Estevam, introducing another Mexican flyweight to the rankings. They need more representation, of course, and as of right now, at flyweight, they really only got Brandon Moreno. They got nothing at bantamweight. They had a little bit of Diego Lopez in the featherweight division, nothing at lightweight. Nothing at welterweight, nothing at middleweight, nothing at light heavyweight, nothing at heavyweight. So they need more guys inside of their top 15s. A finisher, a high-paced guy, great power, great submission ability. Huge for Mexican MMA. So Jesus Aguilar winning is a great case scenario. Bad case scenario, another Rafael decision. Gabriel Bonfim, Chaos Williams. I would honestly say either way is fine. Either way is fine here. There's not really a bad case scenario other than a bad fight. But either way, Gabriel winning, Chaos Williams by submission, by knockout is a good case scenario. There's not really anything bad that could happen out of that one at 170 pounds. Elijah Smith, Vince Morales. Vince, kind of a journeyman gatekeeper to really prove that you are UFC level. He's 3-6. He's good. He's a finisher with a lot of submissions and knockouts in his mixed martial arts career. But of course, they want to build Elijah Smith. His father was a former UFC fighter. He's 22 years old. He's tall. He's lengthy. He's fast. He's a fun fighter to watch. Of course, UFC, best case scenario, Elijah Smith by knockout and beating Vince Morales. Worst case scenario is Vince, again, by decision or just winning flat out. They definitely want Elijah Smith to win. Walter Walker, Don'Tale Mayes. I said it in the intro to this video. Walter winning would be horrible for UFC heavyweight. For the UFC heavyweight division. For Walter Walker to be a ranked heavyweight is an absolute disgrace when he just lost to a 1-5 heavyweight. And his only win is against a losing record heavyweight. If he beats Don'Tale, that'll be another losing record heavyweight on his record. So worst case scenario, we got another boring heavyweight fight, and Walter is a ranked heavyweight. That's going to be a disgrace to all things that are MMA and UFC. Please don't let that happen. And then last but not least, of course, best case scenario, Jacqueline wins. And we got another induction of the top 10 of the women's bantamweight division. Very young fighter as well in Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Best case scenario, she wins. Worst case scenario, we get the most inactive fighter to go out there and win. If she wins, she fights every year, every 2, every 3 years. That's going to be horrible. I mean, we got a fighter in the rankings that does not fight. That's not going to be good. So that's what I got. Best and worst case scenarios. Best case scenarios, Jacqueline wins. Don'Tale by knockout. Elijah Smith wins. Either way is fine here at welterweight. Jesus Aguilar by finish. Mashabjan by knockout. Angela Hill for the win. Jose Delgado by knockout. Vieira by submission. Nazim Sadikov by knockout. Edmund Shabazian by knockout. Youssef Zalal by submission and a fiery post-fight interview. And then Gregory Rodrigues by knockout. Those are the best and worst case scenarios of the card. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Of course, check out that pinned comment. Check them out. All of this for just like 30 cents a day. Crazy value. Go check it out.